I should not have touched him. I knew that the moment my hand landed on his shoulder, just a light touch, automatic, the kind you give someone without thinking, and his entire body went still. Not stiff. Still. The way a person goes still when something reaches them somewhere they were not expecting to be reached. He did not turn around immediately. He just sat there with my hand on his shoulder and the city glowing through the glass behind him and the contract on the desk between us completely forgotten. Then quietly, so quietly I almost missed it, he said it. Touch me like that again, and I won't be able to pretend we're friends. The room stopped. I pulled my hand back slowly. My heart was doing something I refused to give a name to. In 4 days, I was marrying someone else. Welcome to our channel, where we bring you emotional stories that stay with you. If you're new here, hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss a story. And if you're returning, thank you. Your support means everything. Now, stay until the end, drop a comment with your thoughts, and let's begin. Let me tell you how 3 years of careful distance collapsed in one unguarded moment. I passed the bar on my first attempt at 26, graduated top of my class from Howard Law, and built myself into one of the sharpest corporate attorneys in Chicago through nothing but precision and discipline. I did not get where I was by being careless. I got there by reading every room before I walked into it and knowing exactly where every line was. Which made what happened in that office so difficult to explain. Ethan Weston first walked into Callaway and Burke 3 years ago on a Wednesday morning. 33 years old, self-made, the kind of quietly powerful that does not need to announce itself. No flashy entrance. No performance. Just a firm handshake and eyes that assessed everything in a room within the first 30 seconds. Hargrove Industries had just crossed 8 figures, and he needed a corporate attorney he could trust completely. My name was on the short list. Our first meeting lasted 45 minutes. He asked sharp questions. I gave sharper answers. At the end he looked at me and said, "You'll do." I almost told him where he could put that. Instead I said, "I know." That was how it started. The first year was clean and professional and exactly what it was supposed to be. He was a demanding client. Direct, focused, allergic to wasted time. I was thorough, fast, and available because that was my job and I was exceptional at my job. We worked well together in the efficient way good professionals do. Nothing complicated. Nothing that required management. The second year was where things got interesting. Not dramatically. It was never one single moment. It was a slow accumulation of small things that I kept choosing not to examine. Him remembering without being told that I took my coffee black with 1 sugar. Me knowing from the way he held his jaw when he was tense before a board meeting before he said a single word. Our conversations beginning to run past their necessary edges into territory that did not have a professional category. He asked about my family once during a late-night contract review. Just casually, like he actually wanted to know. I told him about my mother in Atlanta, her Sunday dinners, the way her house smelled like sweet potato pie every November, the gospel music that started at 7 on Saturday mornings whether you were ready for it or not. He laughed at that, genuinely, and told me about his own mother in Boston. Cold house, even colder silences. A childhood that felt like a performance nobody enjoyed, but everyone kept showing up to. We stayed in that office until 2 in the morning. The contracts were done by 10. I told myself it was just rapport. Natural professional comfort between 2 people who spent a lot of time together. I was very convincing. David helped. David was warm and steady and present in all the ways that mattered. A high school principal on the south side of Chicago who coached track on weekends and called my mother Miss Gloria without being asked. He loved me the way a person loves something they intend to keep. There was nothing complicated about David. I had been with complicated before, and it left marks I was still finding years later. David was a choice I made with my full mind, not just the loud, restless parts of my chest. When Ethan asked me once why I chose to stay at Callaway and Burke instead of going independent, I told him I liked knowing the walls around me. He looked at me for a moment and said nothing. Later I wondered if he had understood something in that answer that I had not fully understood myself. 6 months ago, I told him about the engagement. Professional courtesy, I told myself, since my schedule would shift around the wedding. He was quiet in a way that was different from his usual thinking quiet. Then he said congratulations and meant most of it. By then I could tell the difference. I chose not to examine why the difference existed. After that we became more careful with each other. Not obviously. He was still sharp, still professional, still the best client I had ever worked with. But something recalibrated between us. He stopped asking about my weekends. I stopped staying past the necessary hours. We built a little more space into every interaction and called it appropriate professional boundaries. It should have made everything simpler. It did not. 3 weeks ago, Ethan called me in for a late-night contract review on the Meridian Group acquisition, the largest deal in Hargrove Industries history. 14 months of work coming down to the final documents. I had reviewed every clause 6 times. I knew this contract better than I knew my own apartment. I arrived at 9. The executive floor was mostly dark. Just his office lit up at the far end of the hall, the desk lamp throwing warm amber light across the room. The city spread wide and glowing through the glass behind him like something out of a painting. We worked for 2 hours straight. He sat at the desk. I stood beside him, leaning over occasionally to point at a clause or flag a line, the way we had done 100 times before. Comfortable. Professional. Familiar. It was sometime around 11 when I saw it. A margin note in his handwriting on page 47 that referenced a clause number that did not exist in the current version of the document. A small error, the kind that would have caused enormous problems at closing. Ethan. I reached across him to turn the page back, my hand landing on his shoulder to steady myself as I leaned over. Just like that. Without thinking. The most automatic thing. And he went completely still. Not stiff. Still. The specific stillness of a person absorbing something. My hand was on his shoulder, barely any pressure, and he had stopped moving entirely. Stopped breathing, I thought. The pen in his hand was motionless. I started to pull back. "Touch me like that again," he said, quiet and low, "and I won't be able to pretend we're friends." The words fell into the room like something dropped from a great height. I straightened slowly. Took 1 step back. The page I had been pointing to blurred in front of me. My heart was doing something loud and inconvenient, and I was trying very hard to act like I could not hear it. Ethan did not turn around immediately. He sat there with his hands on the desk and his back to me and the city behind the glass, and I stood behind him understanding, in the way you understand something you have been carefully not understanding for a very long time, exactly what he had just said and exactly what it meant. Then he turned around. His expression was not dramatic. It was not a movie moment. It was just a man who had said an honest thing and was now looking at the consequences of it with steady, exhausted eyes. "Renee," he said. "Don't," I said. "I'm not going to take it back." Ethan. "I'm not going to apologize for it either." The room was very quiet. I could hear the low hum of the building, the distant sound of the city 40 floors below. The merger documents were spread across the desk between us, and none of them mattered at all. "I have 4 days, I said. "I know. I am marrying David in 4 days." "I know that." He held my gaze without flinching. "I just needed you to know that I know what this is. What it has been. I'm tired of sitting in rooms with you and pretending I don't. My hands were at my sides. I made sure they were still. I had always been good at composure. I had built my career on it. This is not something we can just put back, I said. No, he said. It's not. I looked at him for a long moment. At the amber light on the planes of his face, the tightness in his jaw, the steady burning in his eyes that I had been cataloging and filing away and refusing to name for 3 years. And I thought, with a clarity that frightened me, that he was right. This was not something that could be put back. It had already moved. The question was what I was going to do about it. Quick pause. If you're feeling this story, hype it so others can find it. Comment where you're watching from. Now back to the story. The 4 words he said were, I chose you first. Not I love you. Not don't marry him. Not stay. Just that. Quiet. Final. Like something he had been carrying in his coat pocket for 2 years and had finally set down on the table between us. I stared at him. What does that mean? I said. My voice came out smaller than I intended. It means that every time I walked into a room you were in, I already knew where you were standing. He did not look away. It means that the morning Priya told me you were engaged I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes before I could go upstairs. It means I have been very careful with you, Renee, for a very long time, and I am tired of being careful. My hands were flat on the desk on either side of me. I could feel the cool surface of it under my palms. Grounding. Real. You don't get to do this now, I said. 4 days, Ethan. I know. David is a good man. I know that too. Then why are you? Because you deserve to make this choice with the whole truth, he said. Not the version where you only knew half of what was in the room. The city hummed behind the glass. Somewhere in the building a door closed softly. The desk lamp threw warm light across the left side of his face and left the rest in shadow, and I thought, not for the first time, that Ethan Weston was the most difficult thing I had ever had to be professional about. I thought about David at home. Probably still awake, probably reading, probably with his socks on because he always forgot to take them off before bed. David, who had never once made me feel like standing in a room with him required composure. David, who was safe in the way that I had decided I needed safe. And I thought about the last 3 years. Every late night in this office. Every conversation that wandered past its necessary edges. Every moment I had redirected my attention to a document or a clause or my coffee because the alternative was looking directly at something I was not ready to name. Tell me something, I said. He waited. If I had not gotten engaged, if David was not in the picture at all, would you have ever said any of this to me? The pause that followed was not long, but it was honest. I don't know, he said. Probably not. I almost laughed. So what changed? Losing you to maybe felt different from losing you to definitely. That landed somewhere soft, and I felt it move through me the way music moves through a room, touching every wall before it settles. I looked down at my hands. My engagement ring caught the light. 1.5 carats, princess cut, because David had asked my mother what I would like, and my mother had told him correctly because she knew me the way only mothers do. He had proposed on a Sunday after one of her dinners, on the back porch, while the sound of commissioned was still coming through the screen door. It was a good memory. It was a real one. I looked back up at Ethan. I need you to move, I said quietly. Something shifted in his expression. He straightened slowly, stepped back, gave me room. I slid off the desk and stood, and for a moment we were just 2 people standing in an office at midnight with something enormous and wordless between us. I'm not going to pretend I don't understand what you just told me, I said. And I'm not going to pretend it doesn't matter. Because it does. You know it does. He was very still. But I made a promise to someone. And I made it with my eyes open. My throat was tight, but my voice held. And I can't just. I'm not asking you to break it. Then what are you asking? He was quiet for a moment. Then carefully, like a man choosing each word the way you choose each step on ice, I'm asking you to be honest with yourself before you walk down that aisle. That's all. Whatever you decide after that, I'll respect it. I promise you that. I picked up my bag from the chair by the door. My hands were steady. I had always been good in a crisis. Even when the crisis was wearing an ivory turtleneck and looking at me like I was the answer to a question he had stopped asking out loud. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Renee. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button, stood there watching the numbers climb and trying to locate the version of myself that had walked in here 40 minutes ago confident and clear and certain about her life. She was harder to find than I expected. The drive home took 22 minutes. I know because I watched the clock the whole way you focus on something small and measurable when everything large and important is rioting inside your chest. David's light was still on when I pulled into the driveway. I sat in the car for a moment with my hands in my lap. I thought about what Ethan said. I chose you first. I thought about what that meant and what it cost him to say it and how long he must have been carrying it alone. I thought about David inside that house, socks on, book open, waiting for me without making me feel waited for. I went inside. David looked up from the couch when I came through the door. His reading glasses were on. He had made me a cup of tea and left it on the coffee table, still warm under a small plate because he knew I was always cold when I came back from late-night work calls. He did not ask what took so long. He just moved his feet so I could sit beside him. Everything okay? He said. I looked at him. Really looked. At the steadiness of him. At the particular way he loved me, which was quietly and consistently and without requiring me to perform or explain. At the life we had built together, which was not electric, but was real and chosen and mine. Yeah, I said. Everything's okay. He nodded and went back to his book, and I curled into the warmth beside him and picked up my tea and stared at the wall. Honest with yourself, Ethan had said. Okay. Honest. Honest was that I had feelings I had not fully acknowledged. Honest was that 3 years of proximity and late nights and real conversation had created something that was not nothing. Honest was that Ethan Weston saying I chose you first had moved something in me that I could not simply put back where it was. But honest was also this. Honest was David's tea still warm under a plate. Honest was a man who had built a life with me without drama or mystery or locked office doors at midnight. Honest was knowing the difference between a feeling and a choice. I called Ethan the next morning. He answered on the second ring. I needed to tell you something, I said. Okay. What you said last night mattered to me. I want you to know that. I'm not going to pretend it didn't or act like it was nothing. Silence. But I know what I'm choosing. And I need you to know that I'm not choosing it because I'm running from anything. I'm choosing it because I want it. Because David is who I want. Another silence. Longer this time. Okay, he said. Quiet. Real. I still want you at the wedding. He exhaled slowly. I'll be there. And Ethan. Yeah. Thank you for telling me the truth. Even at the wrong time. I'd rather know. There was a pause and then something shifted in his voice. Something that sounded like a man setting something down carefully and deciding to be okay with where he left it. You're going to be happy, Renee, he said. I genuinely believe that. I know you do, I said. That's why I still want you there. I hung up and sat with my coffee going cold in my hands and let myself feel the full weight of everything that had happened and everything I had decided. It was not painless. It was not simple. But it was honest. And I had always believed that honest was the only ground worth building anything on. For days later I married David. Ethan was there. Third row. He wore a dark suit and he smiled when I walked down the aisle, and he meant it. I could tell the difference. I always could. What would you rate this story? Drop 0 to 10 in the comments right now. If this story moved you, hit subscribe for more emotional journeys every day. And if it truly touched your heart, consider leaving a super thanks. Your support helps us create more stories like this. Every contribution, big or small, means the world. Ready for the next story? It's even more dramatic than this one. Click now. Thank you for being part of this journey.